Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm doing this slimline card, doing a little bit of ink blending, embossing and also Copic coloring. I'll be using the I Like Naps stamp set and coordinating die for my image. So I've got a couple of these in here, but I'm going to use the I Like Naps one for this particular sloth. I've got the Wild About You die from Hello Bluebird. I've also got this embossing die with some leaf pattern on it in a slimline format. I'm sorry, I can't remember what company this came from, but I am sure that you'd be able to have either something similar in your stash or be able to purchase one like it. I've got some smooth white cardstock, just cut a little bit bigger in the slimline fashion than what I need. And I'm going to be doing my ink blending using my darkest Evergreen Bough, Bundled Sage as my middle colour, and Shabby Shutters as my lightest colour. So I'm now going in. I've already put my Shabby Shutters down the bottom, just blending through with my Bundled Sage in the middle, and just working between the colours to make sure I get a nice blend. I'm just using my Dome Sponge Ranger applicators to put this on. I find this really works well when you're just going straight onto smooth white cardstock and just working in circular motions between those colours. So I'm just going to rework this to make sure we've got that smooth blend between the Evergreen Bough and the Bundled Sage. And once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to set this panel aside to dry. And so just keep working your ink blending until you're happy that you've got a nice smooth blend. So now that that's dry and I've cleaned up my workspace, I've grabbed out my die cutting machine and the Slimline stitch rectangles from Mama Elephant. Now I've grabbed out my platform base A, my platform top B, and my cutting plate. So I'm just going to now put my ink blended panel on and my stitched rectangle die over the top, line that up, make sure I'm happy with its position, putting on the cutting plate on the top, and we'll run that through the die cutting machine, and you'll just see a beautiful stitched edge around the edge of that. Now we've got our die cutting machine still out. I'm going to grab our little embossing folder, and I want the raised portion up the top, so you want the raised portion down the bottom so that it pushes up into that kind of recessed leaf pattern on the top. So I'm just going to line that up, centering that in the middle of that slimline embossing folder, and it had moved a little bit, so I'm just going to wiggle that and just make sure that stays in place. Hold that, making sure that that top is at the top. Again, we're just going to need our platform A, but we don't need platform B when we're doing our embossing, just the actual cutting plate for the bottom and the cutting plate for the top, and we'll run that through our die cutting machine. So once that's run through, you'll see now that we've got that beautiful leaf pattern pressed up into our ink blended panel. It was a little bit tight to get out, but it's got some beautiful embossing on that. Now we're just going to grab some pieces of scrap black cardstock I had in my stash to cut out our Wild About You sentiment. So I'm just going to line that up on one. I'm just going to show you one. The other two you don't need to see me do multiple times. So again, we're going to need a platform base A and a platform top B for this. And then put in our cutting base C, and then put in our paper or cardstock and die, and then cutting plate on top. So don't forget our little dot for our eye, so I'll just set that aside somewhere where I know I won't lose it, and just fiddle with this. I'm just trying to be very careful and just work this out gently so nothing tears, and then get that little bit out of the A, and we've got our Wild About You. So I've now cut that out 3 times. I've grabbed my precision glue tool and I'm just going to run this over. I really need to get some new glue. This glue that I'm using at the moment is just really hard running through. It just seems to get really sticky inside these little precision glue tools, so it's very hard to press the glue out. So I do need to place my order and get some glue and some also Copic refills. So now I've got that all glued up. We're just going to grab one of the other Wild About You, just line that up and just wiggle that around to make sure everything's properly lined up before that glue dries, and then we'll do the second one off camera. So we'll grab out our little I Like Naps stamp set and coordinating die, and I'm going to stamp up our image now. So I've grabbed out my Misty and a piece of scrap Copic Express cardstock that I had in my stash. I always like to line that up in the bottom corner of my Misty, and that way if my panel does move while stamping, I know exactly where to put it back and it's going to stamp in exactly the same spot. So I've just lined that up with my little weight. Make sure that's in that right hand corner, and grab out my Memento Tuxedo Black ink, and we'll give our image a stamp up. So that little magnet was in the way, so I've just made sure that's in the corner again while I do my second stamp, and then we've got our image ready to go, and we'll start some Copic coloring. I'm going to do his face light, and then we'll do the darker color for his fur and those little kind of masks over his eyes. So I'm just flicking out, so going with the shadow, kind of having my sun top right hand corner, so all my shadows are going to be on that left hand side. So because this is quite a small image, I'm only going to go in straight away with my dark color to put my shadows in, rather than go through with all my other colors first like I do on normally larger images. So I'm just working out where this shadow is going to sit. So my E47 is going to be my darkest color. We're going to blend that out with the E44 to extend that shadow. And all the colors will be shown in the top left hand corner, but I'll also have them listed in the description box below for you. The next color in our set is going to be the E43. So you can see that I'm just working up in little flicking motions so that we get a nice smooth blend out. Now I'm going to go through the colors because we did actually lose a little bit of that shadowing. So I've left that top little portion uncolored because I want that to be our lightest, like highlight where the sun's hitting him the most. So we'll go over that at the end with our lightest color, the E41. So I'm just flicking that E44 up, flick that out with the E43, and then bring in our final color, that E42, to blend out that whole color. So you can see how much lighter that is on the top. Now with our little branch, I'm just going to use some other E markers. So obviously the little Sloth will be throwing a shadow, so I've got a little bit of shadowing under him, and then also the base of that timber will be in shadow as well on that branch. So my darkest color is the E19. I've blended that out with the E17, then the E15, and my lightest color will be the E13 for my highlight color. So we'll do a full blend out. You can see how now you've got that lighter color just on the top of that branch. Now all my Copic coloring is done. I'm going to grab out my coordinating die, and I'm just going to line that up over my image and grab out some purple tape to hold that in place while I run it through my die cutting machine. Using this purple tape was definitely a game changer for me. I found sometimes my little dies would move, and you would kind of ruin your image by cutting it out incorrectly, whereas the purple tape just seems to hold it perfectly in place. So you can see now I take that out and it's perfectly cut my image. So with my little Sloth and his branch, I wanted to add some leaves at the end, because when I put him on the front of the panel, he kind of looks like he's sitting there in kind of space. So you could use the leaves that come with the stamp set, but I wanted to do some ink blending. So I've grabbed out the Magic Iris 4 leaves add-on, and there's these little 3 leaves that come in that set, which I thought would work perfectly to the end of those. So I'm going to use a couple of the colors. Initially I was just going to use the lighter colors, the Shabby Shutters and the Bundled Sage, and I have my Pink Fresh Studio little ink blenders brushes, but when I did it, it kind of didn't really pop. The colors looked too similar that to me it just wasn't standing out. So I did bring back in that darkest color, the Evergreen Bough that we used for our base, and I just found that worked a lot better. So I did do the other colors off screen. Now, I was initially going to do this card base. It's kind of like a khaki color, but I just found that our panel kind of got a little bit lost there, but I still wanted to incorporate that color into our card base. So I did now cut out a slimline card in black cardstock and then have that khaki color and then our ink blended panel. And I just thought that worked so much better. And it just allows that little all about you to still have that little backing of that color. Now you can see that I've got a bit of dimension in that wild about you. So I am going to use some foam tape for some of our other elements on our card. Now I'd already stuck down the khaki cardstock and then I've just glued that ink blended panel down as well so that that's all nice and ready to go. So to match our card base and also the wild about you, I've grabbed out some scrap black cardstock, just going to prep that with some anti-static powder tool, and using my Versa watermark ink I'm going to do some white heat embossing. So I'm going to give that a double stamp and I'm just going to create a little sub-sentiment. So I've got my folded piece of white printer paper to catch the excess white heat embossing powder as I put that on. And I've preheated my heat tool and I'm just going into the back first to get rid of any particles, and then we'll get that all nice and melted from the front. Once that's dry, I'll just wipe off the anti-static powder tool and cut that out with a little sentiment strip die. Now we're ready to assemble our card, so we want to get our little leaves put on our little sloth. So I've got my wild about you, and not forgetting that little dot that goes on top of our wild, and then we're just going to pop that I like you more than naps that we heat emboss down the bottom, and as I said, I've cut that out with a sentiment banner. So I'm just kind of working out where I want everything placed. So we'll just kind of use each of those different colors of that ink blended panel to put our images and sentiments on. So I'm adding a little bit of glue to that leaf, and then I just want to add another one where that kind of sits over, but we'll let that dry for a little bit and I'll work out where I want these back leaves. So we want a little bit of glue on the bottom of the top one, and we'll do the same for the bottom one. So once they're on, hopefully that other one's had a bit of time to dry, and we'll put that little bit of glue on that actual branch to hold that top leaf in place. Now for my little leaves, I've got these little strips of foam tape. They're quite narrow, so they fit perfectly on these little leaves. So I'm going to add all the foam tape off camera. You don't need to see me doing that, but I'll just show you. I've got some strip ones for the actual sloth body in itself, and also his branch at the end. Just make sure I could see that on the other side, so I'm just going to readjust that position so that's well hidden behind that branch and the leaves. And the rest I'll do off camera on the actual leaves themselves. Now, as I've got that wild about you stacked 3 times, I do want to add some little black foam squares to go behind our little sentiment strip, so that kind of matches in with that black cardstock. Now I'm just going to put that wild about you on so I can work out where I want to place our little sloth. So I've got him attached on the front, and now off camera I'll just pop a bit of glue on the back of this and get that now attached to the front. So I just like to use my tweezers because I can just kind of eyeball it a lot easier when I'm holding my hand away, and it's just that little tweezers, and I find I can line up my sentiments a lot easier that way. So I'm just going to put a little block on top of that. I couldn't find my big blocks. I've only got these small ones that I could find. And while that's resting on that, I'm just going to pop a little bit of glue on the actual panel itself and get our little eye dot on the top there. Now I've taken off all the release paper on our sub sentiment, and I'm just going to line that up and center that under that wild about you at the bottom of our panel. Again, making sure that's nice and straight before giving that a good push down. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. This was really quite simple to make, but with that bit of ink blending, that big bold sentiment wild about you, and that cute sloth image, I think this has made such an adorable card. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.